Good evening, everybody. My name is Rainer. This is Rainier Books. It's time for a tag video on this Tuesday, the 4th of August of 2022. I was tagged by the wonderful Karen from Roving Reader from the wonderful state of Michigan for the Why Haven't I Read These Books Yet tag. And it's a very short tag video, so let's go. So this video I was tagged by Karen. This video is apparently an original video from Greg at Another Bibliophile Reads, two channels that you definitely should subscribe to if you haven't yet. Let's get started with the prompts here. They are pretty short, so this might be over in 7 minutes or so. The first tag, the first prompt is a classic book. So I'm supposed to mention a classic book that I haven't read yet and tell you why I haven't read it. Well, I could give you so many excuses, but there are so many classic books that I haven't read yet. I'm very much into reading very contemporary novels and literature. When I studied German literature, many years ago, I started studying German literature at the Rheinisch-Westfälisch Technische Hochschule in Aachen, the most western city and western town in Germany that you absolutely should visit. I was surprised because we had this subject called Neuere Deutsche Literatur, which translates into, let's say, word by word, newer German literature. When I started studying as a 21-year-old, I thought this would mean that we would read texts that were written after the Second World War, but not so. Even Goethe is Neuere Deutsche Literatur. So Neuere Deutsche Literatur can be several hundred years old, I learned. And I have been very bad in reading classical literature all my life. And now as a booktuber, maybe I'm reading more than ever in my life now, which is very beautiful. I think that I should read a lot of the Russian masters like Dostoevsky and Tolstoy, for example. So these are classics, but let's go for the classics. A classic that I haven't read yet, and I'm almost very timid, very shy here to confess that, is The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. This is something that I have to read yet. I haven't read it yet, and this is a book that I'm promising now, myself and you, will read this year. Start with one of the classics by Samuel Clemens, aka Mark Twain, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, because my professor Alan J. Hansen at the University of Aachen, he was a guest professor from the University of Stockton, University of the Pacific at Stockton, California. He used to say that this book was the beginning of all American literature, Huckleberry Finn. A fiction book. Well, I have to say why I haven't read it yet. Well, there's also the hundreds of fiction books that I haven't read yet, and especially if a fiction book means current books, I'm trying to work my way through, and our lives are so short. You know, when I read like 60, 70 books a year, maybe 60 books a year, which is my goal for this year, even if I make it to 60, if I would read in a pace of 60 books a year, I would only read then I could read about 1,000 books in the next 20 years. This is very limited, so therefore we have to read. There's so many books that we want to read, there's so many books that we want to lay our eyes on and finish them. So a fiction book that I want to read, I just picked a random book from my shelves here, and this is the winner of the Scotiabank Giller Prize Award, and this is Through Black Spruce by Joseph Boyden. Why haven't I read this book yet? I have actually read about 20 pages of it, and then I didn't finish it, but that's definitely a book that I want to pick up again. But it's, as always with many books that I pick up and that I don't finish, that I put aside, I don't DNF them. This is not DNF, you know. This DNF is a book, did not finish, that I just throw away. But this is something that I really want to read, Through Black Spruce by Joseph Boyden. So why? Because other books got in the way. That's a simple explanation of that. And that's also the answer for the next book, which is, that's what I call a bricky one. 900 pages. I see 900 and, oh my gosh, 914 pages has the book, the nonfiction book that I want to show you. It's written in German. I don't know if it's a translation in English. I will check it out. This is by Professor Karl Schlögel, das sowjetische Jahrhundert, Archäologie einer untergegangenen Welt. The Soviet Century, Archaeology of a world that never exists, that doesn't exist anymore. This is a book about the Soviet history of the 20th century, which is immense, which is huge, which has won many, many prizes here in Germany. And Karl Schlögel and I think Timothy Snyder are the foremost experts outside Russia, outside Ukraine, outside Eastern Europe of history, the history of the Soviet Union. And this is essential reading, actually. I haven't read it yet because it's so enormous with 119 pages. So this is definitely something I want to read on my bucket list. And of course it's very timely now because we have the situation with the Ukraine war, which is changing the world. A genre book that I haven't read yet. Genre is crime fiction, and I have crime fiction is one of my favorite genres. Maybe it's the only genre that I'm really reading, because I wouldn't say literary fiction is a genre. It's so too complex and too wide. So let's take a genre book. Let's take a thriller that I haven't read yet. And one of the genres that absolutely got me into reading was the detective novel. The American detective novel of the 1930s and 40s and later in the US, I think until the 1960s with Ross MacDonald, Raymond Chandler, Dashiell Hammett, these guys. And I have a book here that I haven't read that is inspired by these novels from the US, like Sam Weeby's work in Vancouver. Here is the work of Toshihiko Yahagi, which is a Japanese crime author. He has this private detective, a Japanese private detective called Eiji Futamura. And the novel that I have to read, that I haven't read yet, is The Wrong Goodbye. So this I will put now on my list. And this is, I think, the reason for the good thing about this tag is that it sort of reminds us of a few books that we absolutely want to read, that we haven't got to yet, and that we want to read. As usual, I don't tag anyone else. I tag anyone who's watching this video, anyone who makes own videos, and hopefully you start your book channel tonight, your booktube channel, if you haven't done so yet. Please leave me a comment down below about books, about classical books that you haven't read yet and that you absolutely want to read. I forgot a question here. This is the book owned for the longest time but have not read yet. Whoa, for the longest time, whoa, for the longest time, whoa, for the longest time. Billy Joel. So the book I have owned for the longest time but haven't read yet. Okay, a book that is quite some time on my shelves now that I haven't read yet and that I should read is a book that I bought in Portland, Oregon when I came there for the first time in 2017. Actually, I'm dreaming about traveling to North America next year. I don't know if that's possible. We'll see if I can go to Canada or the US or both. Let's see. So I would love to go to Powell's Books again because I actually didn't know that I owned this bookmark from Powell's Books in Portland. Yeah, I do. And I got that when I bought the book The Dream Police, a rock novel by Randy Blazak. This is a book that I have owned for quite a long time. It's about Zach Crisp, a university professor mourning the death of his pregnant wife, becomes entangled in a sexual diversion with a former student in rapidly gentrifying Portland, Oregon. He and his rocket friend Lenny, experiment with lucid dreaming as a way to put the pieces of their lives back together and end up traveling far beyond their musical destinations. Randy Blazak, The Dream Police, from Portland. That is the book that I might have owned for the longest time, but haven't read yet. And I should definitely take a look inside, right? Okay, that's it. That was the tag. Very interesting tag because it sort of gives us it reminds us that there are books that we haven't read yet. That we have so many excuses for all the books behind me that I haven't read yet. There are so many excuses. More or less, they always have the same reason. Too many books. We are polyamorphous concerning books, we book lovers. That means we are looking so many books are attractive to us and we betraying books with other books. Is that a way to put it? No, it sounds crazy. Anyway, this was the video, this was the tech. I hope to see you very soon with a single review of the first Booker book that I read, with a Canada top 10 list reading this summer or this year, and of course with a Sunday sum up. So a lot to come. Stay tuned and subscribe to the channel. Thank you very much. Bye bye.